Fuck it.
Fuck it. Fuck it.
Hey mama, welcome to Fuck It Mothering. My name is Amanda and I am a life coach for moms. I'm an intentional single mom to 4 girls living in sunny Wisconsin. Just kidding, we have like 6 months of winter. My Shih-Tzu Chewbacca is my one true life partner. I laugh too loud, prefer beer over wine, curse like a sailor, and I'm dedicated to teaching other moms the tools to reclaiming their lives. Not in a Kate Chopin The Awakening way. You don't need to give up living and throw yourself into the sea. You can keep your kids and your sanity and also be a whole ass person outside of being that kid's mom. The secret? Learning when to say fuck it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to another episode of Fuck It Mothering. I'm your host, Amanda Haro, and I have another lovely guest, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Just love the title. My name is Josie. I am an indie author and a book coach and a mom and a worker. I live in California. I help writers finish novels, and in particular, I support moms in helping them to figure out, how can they still lean into their creativity while being a mom. I just became a mom last year. My son is going to be a year in August, so like almost a month away, which is insane to think about. And I had been a writer before he came into my life, but, really kind of had to figure out, like, how can I still maintain my writer identity while now being a mom and with all of the changes that, came with that. It was definitely an adjustment, but I feel like I found a good kind of setup that works for me. And so now I'm really interested in helping other moms who either were writers before becoming moms and have maybe kind of fallen off of that a little bit, or who have always had this interest or have suddenly discovered this interest and are now kind of trying to figure out, how do I still have these different identities and still feel like I'm showing up, kind of fully in the way that I want to. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah, which is so beautiful. I love it so much because so many women feel like they have to give up such key pieces of themselves in order to be a good mom, because the societal memo we get is that if our kids aren't number one all the time, and if we're not basically being sacrificial lambs on the altar of our family, then we're not doing it right. We're not being good moms. We're selfish. And all of these horrible connotations that end up holding women back. And it doesn't need to be that way. And actually it's quite the opposite. When you pour into yourself and you prioritize yourself first, it makes you a better mom. And it's so wonderful that you figured this out so early in your motherhood journey. So what was that for you? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So, I'm very happy that I figured it out.
You didn't have to die first and then have to, swim up from the depths of hell to get back to yourself.
And it was definitely I can pinpoint the moment when I sort of realized that I had kind of fallen off a little bit of the writer side and wanted to get back into it. So as I said, I've written before. I'm an indie author. I've self-published a few books under a pen name, and had kind of built up this writer identity from around 2020 or so is when I got serious about it. And so leading up to my son's my pregnancy and then his birth in 2023, I'd had been writing previously. And then when I got pregnant, just so much was happening. Just the brain is not fully functioning in the same way it normally is in pregnancy. And I was struggling to, still work at my day job and also try to write. And so I kind of just decided I'm going to put the writing on pause while I'm pregnant, because I just I'm more exhausted than normal. And I, just want to kind of get through this time. And I think one thing that helped was with me being okay with taking that break was having that writer identity, because I knew that I would return to the writing, and I was just pausing it for now, but I knew that I was going to go back to it. So I took a break while I was pregnant, and then he arrived in August, and obviously those early days and weeks are just chaos. You're not sleeping. I think back on it and it's all just kind of a blur, figuring out breastfeeding and how do we keep this little thing alive? Yeah. He was just always screaming. My husband and I would just look at each other what did we do? So it was just, just like chaos. And within the first, by 6 weeks or so, we've gotten into a rhythm. I felt like, I had time off from work, which was fantastic. And so I felt like we've gotten into a rhythm. I, kind of generally knew what I was doing. I was still late night Googling of random things, but felt, okay, we figured this out. And I had this moment where I'd gotten into a rhythm with him where, we'd figured out breastfeeding, and he was starting to kind of sleep, at least he'd always done a decent job of having decent stretches of napping. He was never just a 30-minute nap, kind of baby, fortunately. So, we would I could figure out breastfeeding, figure out how to get him down to go to a nap. I knew how to do that. I knew how that worked. And I realized that in the time when I wasn't feeding him or forcing him to do tummy time, I realized that I didn't really know what I was doing with myself. I just felt like I was sort of drifting through our house when he was napping, waiting for for him to wake up and for me to feed him again, waiting for that next cycle to start. But I just was just, wandering through the house, not really sure what to do with myself, not able to just settle in that time. And I, part of my writing practice and just my sort of life practice is journaling. That's something that I'm very active with. And so I, was journaling somewhat during this time and just kind of was okay, I don't quite know what's going on. Things feel a little weird. I'm just going to sit down and write out whatever is on my mind and see if I can figure out what's happening with me. And I realized that when he was awake, I had a very specific job, a very specific, this is what I'm doing with him. And then when he would go to sleep, I didn't really know what to do with myself because I wasn't working. And I just I don't know. I forgot all of the things that I would do before he was born. I remember writing down one thing I can do while he's napping is watch TV or read a book. I had to write it down to remind myself that those are things that I could do.
Yes.
And then in that, writing down of okay, here's some ideas of what I can do while he's asleep. Part of it was going back to I was in the middle of a novel when I paused it in pregnancy. So going back to working on it was something that I could do in that time. And just little tiny bits, I wanted to keep the pressure very low. But just having that, seeing that written down on paper of oh yeah, I had this novel that I was working on. I'm no longer pregnant. Maybe, I feel like I'm in a place where I can get back into it.
Yeah.
And so I did. I, pulled up that novel again. I started reading over it and realized that, I wanted to get back into my writing. And so, it was just this realization of I had a specific job that I was doing with him. I had this time when I didn't have to be working, but I didn't quite know how to fill it. And I realized writing is something that I can try to weave into my life with him and still come back to that writer identity. And so once I had that realization, I was able to figure out, okay, what can that look like now, with the lifestyle that we have currently. And then over the past, almost year, I've really had to make some adjustments to what it looks like as well. And what my, writing routine is these days compared to what it was previously when I had a lot more free time and I had, kind of space to fill it with writing. I now have to kind of figure out the balance of, still being there for my son, but also making space for my writing, because that is really important to me as well. But it was just kind of an interesting moment to realize I'd forgotten any of my passions. Really. I'd forgotten all of these things that I loved. And then I made a very conscious decision to, get back into those things and figure out how to balance it with my son.
Yes. But you just said it a moment ago, it's really important to you. So it's you were able to re-identify your values just as a human. And that is the key to balancing whatever it is that we're trying to balance in life, whether we're moms or parents or not. That's always the key is doing a values audit, basically, and just outlining, okay, what's actually important to me. And then once you're clear on that, and once your brain is on board with those values, you figure it out. That's what we're really good at figuring stuff out. Our brains are really good at figuring things out. The problem that most people run into is they're holding on to a value list that isn't serving them. They are nowhere on their values list.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Acknowledging what is important to you. And to your point earlier about it feeling selfish, being okay with acknowledging that you are allowed to have things that are important to you that aren't just your family. Obviously family is so important. And I want to do the best I can for my son in raising him. but I'm also allowed to have other things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I can take up my time because like that just even, I think there's a lot of benefit to our kids when we go after what we love, when we show them, you know, what it means to prioritize what's important to us. But just like at like the baseline is like, you deserve to have things that are important to you. You deserve to, you know, spend your time doing things that aren't just serving others. Like, I think that, yeah, it's important to like hold on to that belief and to acknowledge that it's not selfish to take time spending, you know, doing things that you love, regardless of what it is.
Yeah. Like basically it's not selfish to still be the main character in your own life because it's still your life.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's not selfish to be the main character in your own life. Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah. That's something that I'm always saying to women when I'm talking to them about what I do. It's just like, I help you reclaim that title of you're the main character of your life because you're supposed to be. So I would love to talk about how you're able to hold on to your identity of I am a writer when you have other things going on, like you have a day job and you're also coaching people and you're a writer. So it's like, for me, being an entrepreneur, that's been the biggest shift I've had to make is like living in the belief that I am a coach when I'm not making money as a coach, when I'm in a season of, because I'm in my second year of business, the income is not, it's not steady. Right. And it's not going to be steady for a while, and that's okay. But like being able to hold the belief of still living in that identity of like, I am a life coach, regardless of whether I'm currently today making money as a life coach or not. That was very hard for me. So I would love to like dive into like that journey for you. Because I know that that's the hardest part for most people when they have, you know, a dream or a goal that it doesn't make as much money as their day job, you know, and then they slowly give up because they're like, well, I can't make money, so it's not valuable.
Yeah. And definitely with writing, like that's my reality where, you know, I am making some money from the books that I have out, but it's definitely it's not a lot at all. I guess for me, I don't define my writer identity or even really, I guess, the coaching identity because my business is still new and it's not making me any money at all right now. I'm not defining it by the money, I guess. I'm defining it by the actions I'm taking, right? So like I'm a writer because I show up most days and I put effort into my writing. I'm a coach because I show up most days and put some effort into, you know, the coaching business. Yeah. So I think for me, it's defining it based on the actions that I'm taking and, you know, the money also just, I don't know, trusting that it'll come, trusting that if I continue to do the actions that, you know, likely lead to money, trusting that will happen. But yeah, I think for the writer side, I'm a writer because I take the actions that a writer does. And for me personally, I am working towards, you know, continuing to publish books. And so that's kind of my end goal. And, you know, ideally that does lead to additional income down the line. But I haven't published anything in 2 years now at this point, but I'm still a writer regardless of publishing, even like, you know, regardless of any of the money, regardless of publishing, I'm still a writer because I show up and put in the work and, you know, continue to like come up with random ideas in my head and get them out onto the page and, you know, work on that muscle. So I think for me, it's more about defining it based on the actions that I'm taking and like, yeah, holding on to the identity because of the way that I'm showing up in the world, regardless of any sort of external, like honestly, things that I'm not in control of, right? Like I can't control the money. I can't control, you know, anyone reading what I've put out to the world. But if I show up and do the work, like I feel like I am in that identity.
Yeah. And as you were talking, like, I just realized something. The other areas of our life that we use to help identify ourselves, like I am a mother, I am a sister, I am a wife, I am a partner, I am a friend, all of those other I am statements, none of those make us money. And those
That's
are
true.
like such a deeper part of our identity. Those are the parts that like we care the most about. None of those make us money, but we hold on to them. And
Yeah.
they actually mean a lot more to us than whatever job or career we're currently in.
Yeah. And even though like they're also not necessarily dependent on like external forces, like being a wife sure is dependent on the person on the other side, like agreeing to it as well. But I can still show up as a wife or as a mom without like the other, like needing something in particular from, you know, the other direction. Whereas with defining myself as a writer based on the money that I earn, you know, I have no control over that. So that's just something that, you know, I have no control over how that happens, but I can show up a certain way as a writer and still really be in that identity in the same way that I can show up as a sister, as a friend, as all of those things and still have that identity. So I think it's like trying to get sort of deeper with the identity that you're claiming and having it based on something that isn't just kind of either surface level or something you're like not really in control of. Holding on to it in that way.
Yeah. And funnily enough, when you are able to like let go of the expectation of it performing a certain way or the expectation of, you know, money coming to you in a certain timeline, that's usually when things start opening up for you, is when you are able to let go, which is ironic and funny and also very frustrating. Oh man. So what led you to want to help other women? Because, you know, it's kind of just like great that you're able to do it for yourself. You know, you could have just kept on keeping on in your own lane. What made you want to help other people?
I had that thought about, you know, eventually wanting to help other people when I first, you know, really got serious about my writing in 2020. I've been a writer my whole life, done it, you know, all throughout school, and never really thought that it was like an achievable thing to like put my words out into the world and, you know, kind of make a living that way. But I'd always been, you know, a writer, and I'd always attempted to write things and never quite figured it out. And then in 2020, you know, obviously with the world the way that it was, I really just like committed to it. And it was like, I want to see my book out in the world. I also learned about self-publishing at that time and kind of realized like, oh, there are different paths to getting your book out into the world and getting readers and all of that. So it became like, it seemed more possible at that point. And so I really committed to it and had to work through a lot of like internal, you know, sort of doubts and fears and all of these things to actually reach the point of being able to put my books out into the world. And just going through that experience, it was so transformative of just like proving to myself that I can do this thing that, you know, feels really hard, but that I'm very passionate about. I realized that like just kind of immediately after I had that experience, I was like, I want to help other people have this experience as well. Because I, you know, in every single writing group that you go into, there's someone who's having all of these doubts, all of these concerns, questioning what they're doing. Like it's just, and even after having written several novels, those doubts still come up all the time. But I knew, I could see very clearly that other people were going through similar experiences, and the like amazing feeling that I had of like actually achieving this childhood dream of actually like having a book that I can like hold in my hand. Like I've got 6 books on my bookshelf right now that I have written, like that came from my head. It was just such an amazing experience. And I was like, oh my goodness, I absolutely want to help other people do this. And it didn't. So I had that like realization pretty soon after I published the first book in 2021. But then had to kind of, because it's like, okay, my writer identity is solidified. I now have to work on the identity of like, oh, I can actually help people like that. There were still some doubts about that. So I didn't really get into it until about 2023 or so, when I was kind of like, okay, I've like done, you know, I've written several books by this point. I'm still interested in helping other people. Like, what can I do to, you know, start to think about what a coaching business would look like, start to kind of, you know, figure out how I specifically would want to help other writers. And it's now been a very long journey of like working on that identity and that belief that like, that is something that I can offer to people. But the interest, the desire to want to help others kind of was always there because I had such an amazing experience of getting to a place of like actually finishing a novel that I just, was like super excited about wanting to help other people also achieve that dream.
Beautiful. Love it. So how do you find time to write when you have a day job and you have a coaching practice and you have a baby?
Yeah, the biggest thing has been just like really lowering my expectations on myself and like taking off the pressure. Yeah. And I think, having really, really low expectations, but also like having that writer identity, I think has been the thing that's kind of made it. So I would, if to like give the advice to someone else, I would say like starting there, of just working on that identity and acknowledging and believing the fact that if you have the intention of writing and you are putting effort into writing, that makes you a writer.
Yes.
I think that's a really good place to start if it doesn't quite feel true for you. I think you have to start
there because that's what's going to get you out of bed. That's what's going to get you to show up every day and actually give this a shot.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the thing that helps you keep going when it gets hard.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that mindset helped me starting out with like getting back into writing once my son was born. And then what's kept me going is, having very, very low expectations for myself, in the sense of like not expecting myself to be able to write at the same like frequency or like word count that I could do previously before he was born. So acknowledging that like it's going to look different, but still committing to, doing my best to show up as many days as I can. While acknowledging that like my life, looks a certain way now. So I think at the beginning of this year, I was on maternity leave August through basically the end of last year, and then went back to work in January. And so really had to kind of figure out, okay, what does this balance look like where I'm like still showing up in all of these different places. I cut my expectations for myself. I cut them down super low. I think I started out the year with like, if I can do 5 minutes most days of the week, like showing up to my story and working on it, I will feel great about that.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I was like, okay, 5 minutes, just like get a little bit written. Perfect. Love it.
Yes.
Over the past 6 months, I've been gradually increasing that amount. I'm now up to 20 minutes a day. And I love 20 minutes. I feel great about 20 minutes.
Yes.
At some point, maybe I'll increase it. Like maybe when 20 minutes feels like super easy.
Yeah.
But I feel very happy with 20 minutes and knowing that like, this is my time. I want to get as much done as I can. I feel like my output has increased in that time. Like I've found that I've like gotten, I don't know, there's less time spent sort of at the beginning because, writing is very much something where you're like, there's so much brain work happening that it's very easy to like not actually output anything because you're so in your head about it.
Yes, I'm also a writer. I completely understand.
It's very easy to. And I think when you have like an hour to write, you're going to spend the first 20 minutes.
You waste so much more of that time. But when you have 5 minutes or when you have 20 minutes, you're able to like laser focus. So in a sense, it's kind of better. It's a better use of your time overall.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I have found that I discovered that was happening, that like, even with this tiny bit of, not very much time, I'm able to get definitely way more done than if I had a full hour, because I would spend a lot of that hour just kind of like
spinning,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest tip, work on the identity and really own the identity, but then like lowering expectations and committing to the lowered expectations. Because I think when I say that to people, they're like, oh, well, I need an hour, or is it worth it if I can only do 5 minutes? And it's
that one
like,
right there. Is it worth it? Yeah. People get caught up on just like, because it's almost like not like a sexy goal. It's not like exciting. It's like, that feels too easy. It's like, seriously, are you complaining because it's too easy? Are you listening to yourself and how you're just getting in your own way right now?
Yes. And all that time spent like trying to justify it, trying to be like, well, other people can do more. It's like, if you just like sat down and wrote for 5 minutes, like you'd have something that you currently don't have because you're in your head about it. Exactly. So like, why don't you just try writing for 5 minutes for the next week and just see what happens instead of like getting in your head about it?
Yeah.
But
isn't that funny though? The human brain is so funny. It just like, it looks at it and it's just like, that's not fun. That's not exciting. That's stupid and lame. And other people are doing this stuff. And it's just like everything that you just said. It's just like, you're wasting so much extra time right now.
So much time.
Resisting even trying it. Just try it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we spend so much time in our heads and not just like doing the thing.
Yeah.
So one of my big, like kind of mental hurdles that I had to get past, in the past 6 months, I, had like kind of set an expectation of like, I'm going to try to write, as many days of the week that I can. I told myself I would keep the pressure off. But I found that, I'd write like 3 days in a row, and then I would have a day where I just wasn't able to write those 10 minutes or whatever because of XYZ reasons. Like, okay, no big deal. But then the next day I would show up to write and just like start to get in my head about the fact that I hadn't written the day before. And like, therefore it felt harder to get back into it that next day. Yeah. I started thinking about what I'd written 2 days before. And I was like, I don't think that's any good. I started questioning what I was writing.
Yes.
I've been writing something this year that is different than what I've done before. And I'm writing it in kind of a different way than I've done before. So like, I was doubting my abilities to even do it. I was like, all of these doubts were coming up. And so, I'd have one day that I missed it. The next day I'd get in my head about it and be like, oh, I just don't think I can do it. And I'm someone who like avoids things that I don't like to do. So I would just like not write that day. And then the next day would come. And again, I'd have the same cycle of things. And I was talking to my therapist about this and how I was just like, really, I just keep avoiding the work. I don't know what's happening. And she was like, well, maybe it's possible that your writing just has breaks in it. It just naturally has breaks. And like, maybe you don't have to let those breaks mean anything. You can just have a break and then the next day get back into writing.
Yeah.
And that just like, that clicked something for me where it's like, oh, it's totally okay that I have a day where I don't write because, work is crazy. My son is sick. I have a migraine, like whatever. That's okay.
Or you just don't want to.
Day.
It's okay.
Don't want to. Yeah, it's totally okay. The next day, I don't have to let that mean anything. Mm-hmm. I can just show up and get back into my 20 minutes of writing and keep making progress. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about this recently because I recently finished a first draft and I want to go back to my like schedule and see like the days, the time when I didn't have this realization, how many days in a row did I miss versus once I realized it's okay to take breaks, how quickly did I get back into writing? Because I feel like I'll see a stark difference of like, I had like 4 days in a row of not writing versus like just one day in a row of not writing. Yeah. But it just, it like did something in my brain where I was like, oh, the break doesn't have to mean anything. Like it just is what it is. Yeah. And I can still show up and keep writing.
I don't have to use this as an excuse to another reason to shit on myself.
Yes. Yeah. I don't have to feel bad about this. It just is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. It was like, oh, mind blowing. And so I think that's a good example too of the fact that like, these like doubts never really go away. No matter how much you've written, like there's always going to be something going on in your brain. And so like knowing that, especially if you're a beginner writer who's like just trying and it has all of this like angst about your writing, like it's totally normal. It's totally okay. Like you can get past it. It's never really going to go away. But I think it gets easier to like identify it to an extent. This break and like rest one was very new for me. So like it took me a while to realize what was happening, but I think it is, it shows that like it's possible to get past these things, even if it feels so big in the moment. It's like, it's okay. We can just take a pause, think about this, figure out a way to get through this.
Yes. Yeah. So a lesson that I've been really implementing in all aspects of my life, really, but especially in my business is just like, I just need to stop taking life so seriously all the time. Like it's not such a, like to your point you were making earlier, like it's not such a big deal, in the moment, our brains, like in the middle of the spiral, it feels like such a big deal, but it's not. And if in the moments when I can just like, okay, I don't have to take life so seriously. I don't have to take all of these things so seriously. Like, and so I've just been trying to like lead with joy and lead with, just let's have fun. Let's just see what happens. Let's go with the flow. Because all of the angst and the worrying and the, trying to force myself into a certain schedule and maintaining it all the time, it's not working and it feels horrible. So let's shift. Let's see if it can be easy. Let's see if it doesn't have to be quite so hard.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And I think kids are a good sort of way to see that. Like
Yes.
I've definitely found with my son, because for sure in the early days, and it's so hard when they're so little and all they can really do is scream. Yes. That's the only way they can communicate. It's really so hard. But there was so much Googling, so much like questioning. What are we doing? What is happening? Are we doing it right? Are we messing him up? Like all of these things. And once he started like giggling, I feel like that brought some joy back to me. And a lot of I was able to kind of try to release some of that pressure and just be like, I'm doing okay. I'm doing a good job. He is happy. He's so happy when he sees me. Like this doesn't have to be so hard. I can find ways to make it easy. I can find ways to like get back into the joy of it and just like really love the time that I get to spend with him. And same thing with the writing. It's like, how can I make it easy? 5 minutes a day. That's it. That's all I have to worry about. I don't have to like stress about that.
Yes.
That is a way to make it easy and still show up and feel good about it. So I think having my son has helped with that realization as well, because he gets so much joy from like those silly things. And it's like, okay, how can I also find joy in these like little weird, like he'll just like stare at, we have hardwood floors, and he'll just like stare at it and like mess around with like touch the lines and everything. I'm like, I don't know what he's doing, but he loves it so much. And that's just so amazing.
I know. Yeah. And that's what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. Like we're supposed to be enjoying it. We're not supposed to be shitting on ourselves constantly and making it so hard. It doesn't have to be such an uphill struggle all the time. I mean, life comes with struggles, but it should be a 50-50. It shouldn't be like a 90% struggle and 10% joy. And you have to get through the 90% struggle in order to earn the 10% joy. Like, no. Yeah. And I've also found like when I'm able to stay in the mindset of like, just go with the flow and just like, oh God, I worded it a different way, but like, it also makes the failures like, oh, don't take it too seriously. It also makes the failures not so deep and not so like intense, because I'm not taking everything so seriously, and then I can get to the learning part of the failure. I can keep that curiosity and be like, okay, what can I tweak? What can I do differently next time? Because I'm not making it all about me and how I'm a lazy piece of shit and will never accomplish anything.
Yeah, that's a good like business lesson as well. I think that's something that I've, been kind of working through with this new coaching business of just like, trying to spend less time going through those spirals and that angst and questioning everything and just being like, nope, this is not this. I'm not doing brain surgery. Like it does not have to be this complicated thing. I'm trying to do it because I want to have joy. I want to be doing something that is joyful and can give me freedom and all of these things. So like, what can I do to just figure it out and be curious and not let it mean anything about me that it's like not going a certain way or it's not going the same way that someone else's, kind of business is going. How can I just, make this fun and feel good about it? I think anytime we do something that like is kind of deviating from the sort of typical like way that people generally come up in life of, going to school, college, having the job, all of these things. I think when we deviate, it's very easy to like get in our heads about what's happening and trying to, bring back that joy and acknowledge that like we're deviating because we want this to be fun and enjoyable. So let's try not to like let our brains spiral so much about it. Yeah.
And we're deviating because that other formula just doesn't work for us. And that's okay. And it doesn't work for quite a few people actually. And I have so many friends who, cause we were all fed the same, formula of like, go to school. Just get a bachelor's in anything and you'll have a career and then you'll be set for life and all this stuff. And it's just, there were so many people flooding the market that a bachelor's isn't good enough. And so then, I have friends who had to go back to school after they already had a bachelor's in something. They went back to school for something else. And it's just like, okay, when are we all going to acknowledge that this formula does not work for everybody? It's not like a one size fits all, because life isn't a one size fits all. It's stupid. I don't even know why we fell into the trap of believing that it could be that. But it's hard to break away from that socialization when you've been fed it your whole life. There's very deep rooted beliefs in our subconscious that want us to stay there, want us to believe that that's where safety is. And every time you're deviating, you're butting up against a subconscious belief that you've got to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, did you always know that you wanted to be a mom?
That's a great question. I think it was always like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think it was like always kind of in the plan. Always sort of in the plan. Never something that I was like super striving towards, but just like this will happen. Right. I like kids. I've always generally liked kids. I've always generally kind of been like, a carer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same way. And then I ended up having 4. So
you're like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to really do it.
Yep, I commit. So how was, because, you're talking about how it's, you already kind of touched on this, but like your transition into motherhood, because it's all consuming and your life changes overnight. And for all of the courses, prenatal courses, and I feel like our generation has a lot more resources available than our parents' generation, but still no one really prepares the mom for like, your life is completely different now. It's more so like, here are some tools to help you. And, your life is basically going to look the same. You're just going to have like a baby and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like it's still a shift that is like actively happening with me of like being like, oh yes, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life is being a mom. Like it's still a belief that, it's kind of, being ingrained in me. I don't know. I have a picture of my son on my desk. So I just keep looking at him as we're talking and just like smiling in it. It's like the most like wild thing and wild experience of just like having this little thing that, over the past year has changed so much, turned into this new thing so much. And I feel like I've really like gotten very good at understanding him, understanding what he needs, like just, the experience of being like, oh, I can kind of, predict what he wants, figure out when he's hungry. I can, if he's crying, I know how to make him laugh. Like I've, figured that out.
Building that trust within yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. The trust that like, I can figure this out. I can,
you are actually the parenting authority for your family and your son.
Yes. That's insane to think about. Yeah. And just like, right. It's not going to go perfectly. It doesn't have to go perfectly. I'm going to do the best that I can. He's going to reach a point where like he has his own opinions and that'll be a new journey to figure out.
Yeah. Enjoy it.
Yeah. So I think like acknowledging, right, that I am a mom, that I am that parental authority is definitely a thing that I'm still figuring that out. I'm still kind of getting to a place of like, oh yeah, I guess this is what we're doing.
I guess this is real. I understand that. It took me like so long and I don't even remember when the switch happened, but it was so wild to me when my first was born to say anything with the words, my daughter, like to refer to her as like my daughter, like calling and making an appointment. I got to make an appointment for my daughter. I don't know what it was about that word. It just sounded so grown up. Also, I was 22 when I had her, but still I was like, every time I was like, this is wild. This is like, whatever it was about that word, it just made it very, very real to me every time. And it took like probably that whole first year of her life for me to get used to, I have a daughter.
Yeah, being a mom is weird. That sounds like weird coming out. Like, right? I'm a mom.
Yeah, I know it does, but it does take time to get used to that and like really embody it. Even though the kid is totally here, you've totally been doing it for almost a year, and it still feels weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like that's really important to like just say out loud because I've never heard someone else say that. And it would have been helpful for me to have heard that back then when I was just feeling psycho in my own head. What's been the most difficult? So let's do 2. What has been the most enjoyable thing of this first year of being a mom, and what's been the most difficult thing?
The difficult thing has like shifted and changed, you know, so,
Right.
so much of the past, like at every stage there was like something difficult. So I'm going to sit on that one maybe a little bit. I think the most wonderful thing is just like his existence. I don't know, like just, his existence and like his giggles. Yeah, I think it's just his existence. So I had a miscarriage before him, and so obviously that was so tough and so tough in ways that I didn't really expect. I think it was still that, like, you know, the mom identity being something that I knew I was going to do, but, you know, hadn't fully like owned, and then having to go through the experience of losing, you know, this baby that like still felt not fully real to myself. Like that was just, you know, a lot tougher than I expected. And so then having, you know, my son and getting through all of pregnancy, labor, and him actually being in the world, like just, his existence and watching him grow and develop and seeing all of the like weird things that he does. It's just been like such a, wild and magical moment to get to this place of like, oh, this is our reality now. Just having this little guy that is going to keep growing, going to have opinions, going to have a personality, do all these things. Like we'll just talk about like, he's going to be 10 one day. Like, what is he going to do when he's 10? I don't know, but it's like crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I think his existence has been just like so magical. I think the tough part, the hardest part, and maybe it doesn't feel so hard anymore because I've been sort of working in it, but I think it's just the trust, the self-trust, and like building that up. And because I'm definitely someone who, you know, I want to have the right answers. I want to do things correctly, the right way. You know, I want to not mess up, and babies are just the exact opposite of all of that. They're just like not going to let you feel like confident or good about anything that you're doing. And it's, you know, pure chaos, especially in those first 3 or 4 months. Like, oh my God, so much chaos. And so, having to get to a point of working on trusting myself and trusting that I'm making the right decision. I think it's still something that I'm like actively doing. And, you know, we'll have times when like I, you know, feel maybe bad about something. Recently had a night out with some friends. Next day was very hungover and like felt some guilt about being hungover. Like my husband having to like help, you know, like take care of our son when I couldn't, and like do the things that I was not able to do that day because I just like wasn't feeling up for it. And I think the guilt was probably because it was like, you know, I had gone out and gotten drunk and was then dealing with that. Like compared to like if I were sick, I think I would be like, okay, I'm sick, like it's fine. You know, my husband's gonna
It's a justifiable excuse,
right? Yes, yeah. I mean, it felt more justified versus like having a night out and then having to live with the consequences of it. And the day after it, I was able to look back and be like, that was not a big deal. Like it was okay that you had this night out and that you like then sort of regretted it the next day. And like, it's fine to be like, I probably will try to avoid hangovers in the future because he does still wake up at 6. And even if I can, like there's still, you know, it's not a fun experience to be hungover with the baby. Like it's not enjoyable. So I'm going to, you know, try not to do that, but also it happens and that's okay. And if it happens again in the future, that is okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's still that like, you know, learning to trust myself and trust that like I'm making the right decisions for him, and that like, I'm not going to do it perfectly every single time. And like that perfection is not expected, and that is perfectly okay. But I think that still continues to be something that I'm working through and trying to grapple with.
Yeah. Well, perfection is impossible. There is no perfect way. There is no one right way to do motherhood. There's only a couple of ways to like truly, truly get it wrong. And that's neglect and abuse. And that's it. And everything else, there's a million different right ways to raise your kid. And you are the perfect mom for your son. It's already all inside of you.
Thank you for saying that. I love to hear that.
Yeah, you just need to learn how to trust your own authority instead of constantly outsourcing your authority, because that's what we're doing when we're Googling. And there's nothing wrong with researching and Googling, and you know, I'm not dissing it at all, but there should be a line right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the motivation behind it. If your kid, especially when they're babies and they can't like articulate exactly what they're feeling in their body, but like, they're sick or like they spike a really high fever for the first time, it's fucking terrifying. Google it. Okay. Like you need, I understand that. But when it's constant, when like the first impulse is always to like outsource it. I don't know, outsource it. I'm going to read everyone else's opinion and then I'll come up with my own. Just sit with yourself first.
Yeah. Yeah. Take a moment and like think about what you think is the right thing. First.
Yeah. Cause there's you're not going to fuck him up. Yeah. Cause you're a good person.
Yeah. That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to fuck him up because you're a good person. I think for me personally, I have some mother challenges that, have maybe made this a little bit more difficult for me of just, getting to a point of feeling confident for myself that like, I am the perfect mom for him. I will not fuck it up. Yeah. Like even saying it, it's like, of course, yes, those things are true. But I think we all can maybe have some things in our past that can make those beliefs harder to really acknowledge and hold on to. So yeah, just hearing that message and repeating it, I think is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all have our own shit from the past, but the past is in the past and it doesn't, like your past does not define your today and it does not define your tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I strongly hold this belief that every mom is already the perfect mom for her kid. She just needs to trust that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you're doing a great job. You are a great mom and you're the perfect one for your son. No one else could raise him the way that you can.
Yeah. That's true. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I am curious about the whole self-publishing process, if you have time to like delve into that. So like, it's one thing to be like, I want to check this out, but then I don't know. I'm thinking about the hypothetical like way that it would go about. And I'm like, that seems a little technical and overwhelming. So like,
yeah, it is a process and there are a lot of steps. Honestly, I think the writing of the book is the harder part because that is so like, that can feel very much like, oh, there's just like steps that you follow and you get to the end. And it can be getting to the end of your story, having the confidence to do it, trusting yourself, getting past any sort of inner like thoughts that it's not going to be good. It's a waste of time. What's the point? All of these things. These are all doubts that I've had to deal with. I think that is the really like hardest part of just like trusting that you can do it. And that like one of my beliefs is that if you're drawn to writing, a novel, you are meant to do it. You could be drawn to doing anything else, but like
I have that same belief. Like if you're drawn to it, you're drawn to it for a reason. Yes, it's for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. And so I think just like working through that and really believing that to then get to the end of it, I think that is the biggest hurdle. And then all of the other stuff, it's just like, then it does kind of become like, okay, there are maybe some best practices to follow, some steps to follow. There's a lot of software, so much software out there that can like walk you through the process. There's a lot of resources out there that can walk you through the process. My biggest tip is you should not pay someone to publish your books on your behalf. You should not pay like an exorbitant amount of money for someone to do it on your behalf. There are a lot of like vanity publishers out saying that like, we'll put your book out there, we'll market it, we'll do all this stuff for you. And it's just often what ends up happening is that they are just taking advantage and putting your book out. And it's either done poorly, like the editing is poor, the book cover is poor, or there's no marketing on the other side of it. So the book just like languishes out on the internet. So I think, there's some shifts in that, some like, more reputable companies that are kind of creating a model where they're supporting indie authors and charging for their services because they are offering services, but in a way that is, more reliable or just, kind of in a better way, versus those more sort of like scammy companies. But I think, just, finding good resources, finding people who are talking about self-publishing in a reputable way and listening to what they have to say. I think I would highly recommend Joanna Penn. She has the Creative Penn podcast, and that's Penn with 2 N's. She, I think, is a great resource for self-publishing and just kind of like helping you work through like, what does this actually look like? She has a ton of books about the process, and is just constantly talking about like, how can you do this in a way that gives you the most freedom and control and, you know, is done in a way that you're going to feel the best about. So I would recommend that. And yeah, I think it's really just like, you know, figuring out the steps. There's definitely not a single way to self-publish. There are a lot of different ways that you can do it. And so you do kind of have to just like be willing to commit to doing it a certain way and be okay with the fact that you're not doing it the exact same way that someone else is doing it, and it's still okay. And also I think with the sort of like traditional model of, you know, go get an agent, get a publishing deal, often the way that model works is you have your single book, it's released out into the world, and it needs to do well in that release. And it needs to do well within the first like 6 months of it, or else, you know, your publisher might drop you if it's not selling enough. Whereas with self-publishing, there's always an opportunity to put a book out. Maybe it doesn't do great or perfectly, just try again, do it again. Like you have the ability to just put another book out, and the act of putting books out into the world, practicing, building up the skills of like figuring out how to do it. You're not so reliant on a single book in the way that the more traditional model is
that makes
reliant
sense.
on a single book.
Yeah.
And so I think,
because if the first book isn't successful, they're not going to
right. Yeah. They're not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where when you're doing it all yourself, the first book, okay, it doesn't do so well, put it on another one, and just like keep trying and keep, you know, working on your craft, building it up, figuring out like, why
don't do it
didn't
the
work
exact
before?
same way. Like have some critical thinking there.
Yeah. But it doesn't, you're not so reliant on that single book going, you know, a certain way. So if it doesn't turn out the way that you were expecting or had hoped, just know that you can learn some more about what didn't work and do it again and just keep going.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people connect with you if they would like to know more?
Yeah, I am pretty active on Instagram. You can come find me at Josee Smith Book Coach, and that's Josee spelled Josee. I share writing tips and some of my writing and the challenges and struggles that I'm like actively dealing with. And I also offer one-on-one coaching for writers who want to finish a novel. So you can come learn more about that on Instagram, and we can set up a consultation call to just like talk through your writing, figure out how my coaching can help support you. So yeah, I would love to connect with more writers and help them finish their novels.
Wonderful. And I like to end every guest episode with a round of lightning questions. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty sure I know the answer to this one, but it'll be interesting if it had changed. What did you want to be when you grew up?
An author.
Yeah.
I didn't believe that I could, but an author. Yeah.
This one doesn't really pertain because your son is too young, but what's your favorite kid-free dinner? So if your husband is not allowed to bitch, moan, or complain about what you're eating, what are we having for dinner?
Macaroni and cheese, which I think is a kid dinner, but it's also my love of dinner. And my husband would not want that for dinner, probably. He'd expect some vegetables in there. But for me, mac and cheese.
Like, do you do a homemade mac and cheese, or is it like Kraft mac and cheese?
I do have a homemade recipe that has so much cheese. It's probably worse than the Kraft mac and cheese because it has so much added cheese in it, but it's a good like Thanksgiving dish.
Yeah.
There's like 4 different types of cheese in it and a lot of Velveeta. It's so good though. It's so good.
What is your favorite book?
Oh my gosh, this question, because there's so many books. I have been recently enjoying the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Orman, I believe his last name is. It's about a group of senior citizens at like a retirement home who solve murders, and it's British. It's delightful.
Senior home.
Yes, yeah.
Please
it's delightful.
tell me
Highly
that
recommend.
one of the seniors is the murderer. He's just like wheeling around in his wheelchair, pulling oxygen tanks out.
So none of the senior citizens die. All of the murders are like tangential to this community. Okay. There's like a set of 4 of them who they're the ones who they have a Thursday murder club where they try to solve like cold cases. Uh-huh. One of them is a former spy. So that does, lend. She often has a gun in her purse. So it's delightful. Would highly recommend.
I'm going to read that. It sounds fascinating. Oh my God. What's your guilty pleasure entertainment?
I'm a rewatcher of everything. So just any sitcom that I've ever seen before, I'll watch it through and then go back to the beginning and just keep watching it. I'm currently doing that with Superstore, and recently finished that up with The Office, just like all the way back through.
I love The Office.
Repeating myself.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, tip on The Office. Peacock, the streaming platform, they have like extended bonus, extended episodes
Do they?
of like deleted scenes. Yes. So I like went to watch The Office, thought I was just getting the regular pilot, and all of these new scenes are being added in. I'm like, I've not seen this before. What's happening?
How funny.
And it's, because they've added like deleted scenes.
Oh my gosh.
Peacock. So
thank you for telling me that, because I have
amazing.
Peacock. I have Peacock for the Hallmark Channel because I love Hallmark Christmas movies. So right now it's Christmas in July. And so I've been watching Christmas movies in July.
Amazing.
But I didn't know that Peacock, I knew that The Office was on Peacock, but I didn't know that it was like the extended versions. That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Love that.
Love it.
So this question I've stolen from the Low Life podcast because it's too good not to steal. If your belly button was an actual button, what would it do?
Squeak, I think, probably. Just like a little squeak. Yeah.
Just for like some humor whenever you need
it. It would just be me. It would just be me pressing it. Just little squeak.
Oh my God. And finally, what's one thing in motherhood you'd like to say fuck it to?
Comparison.
Yeah, the compare and despair. That's a sucky game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a lovely day. And I'm definitely checking out that senior murder mystery.
Yes, highly recommend. Thank you so much for having me. This was delightful.
Are you ready to learn how to prioritize yourself? To ditch the wash, rinse, repeat stress cycle you've been stuck in for good? To connect with the amazing, badass, unique woman you are and let her flaunt her badassery with reckless abandon? Click the link in my show notes to sign up for one of my on-the-go coaching packages so you can live your one wild life to the fullest now. No need to schedule anything in that overflowing calendar of yours. This is coaching that works around your schedule no matter how chaotic it gets. Coaching for the busy mom designed by a busy mom. No more excuses. You've put yourself off long enough. It's time to be the main character of your own life again, don't you think? See you next week, gorgeous.